All right. So I'm your host, Shankar Ramani, and I have been practicing Sahaj for well over 25 years now. But as I always say, that doesn't mean much. Everything centers around the individual state, and that state of higher consciousness somebody can achieve in a few days or a few weeks, or may not achieve that well over a couple of decades. Anyways, I'm here to share information about our approach as a person who is pursuing spirituality and meditation to money and finances. And I think that this session will go well over maybe 2 or 3 hours. I am not going to be sharing all of that today. So we will look at some part of the basic concepts today. Of course, each of these sessions has two meditations. We start off with meditation in the beginning, and then we discuss specific problems or specific aspects relating to the particular topic that is chosen. And then we also have a second round of meditation. In many cases, that will be related to the specific topic, depending on what the topic is. So there will be two meditations and an explanation in between. As always, feel free to ask questions. Use the chat function, especially on topics like this. I would love questions. I will try and answer as many as I can. And also, you can send questions offline in case you have any follow-ups on what is being covered over here. With that said, let's get into it. Let's get to the meditation first. And last session, what we did was we went over the basic framework for solving any problem in life. And the first thing in that is to achieve that higher state of consciousness that I spoke about. And it's important that the generic approach that each of us who's practicing meditation follows is that we must work on our state, which means that during our meditation, we connect ourselves to this all pervading divine energy. And when we say we connect ourselves, we connect our spiritual being. And that spiritual being is comprised of our spiritual system, subtle system, which is again comprised of the Kundalini energy, the chakras, the nadis or the channels, and the soul or the spirit residing in our heart. So, this spiritual being achieves a connection with the all pervading power, and that happens when the Kundalini energy rises and it lifts our attention to this higher state. Now, thereafter, if we continue to meditate as often as we can, possibly 1 or 2 times a day or more, then this connection gets established and we grow stronger and stronger, and it leads to the widening of the central channel. And once this central channel is sort of established and widened, then the connection becomes stronger, and that connection helps us achieve that higher state. So, in essence, the more we are spending time at the higher state, the better everything is going to be for us, and problems begin to disappear. And that's because the higher state of consciousness is, you could say, infinitely intelligent. It knows everything, it moves everything in this universe, it does everything. And so once you are part of that power, hardly anything can go wrong in your life. But as I said in our last session, the challenge is how do you get to that state, and how often we get to that state and remaining at that stage. And then we also saw the second approach is, yes, you work on your state, but you also have to fix specific problems. And you have to fix problems through spiritual means, through clearing chakras, for example. You also have to make changes in your lifestyle, in your thinking, in your approaches, and so on. That was the basic framework we discussed. And then we went over one problem, which was if you are feeling lethargic, moody, and even depressed sometimes, not enough energy, feeling tired, and so on and so forth, then how do you solve that problem? So today, let's get started with the first session of meditation. And the first approach, before we even discuss money and finances, is to work on our state. So we will work on our state. And if you are here for the first time, it does not matter. You can still catch up on the basic techniques and how to establish your meditation and so on, we have many other sessions by other instructors. This session will still be useful to you. We will still go over the meditation even if you're here for the first time, but on a relatively limited basis. We will just straight away take you through the collective meditation to that state. We will meditate for a while. We are not going to be, however, discussing chakras and the typical standard content and the standard approaches. All of that is covered in some of our other sessions. So with that said, let's get into the meditation first, the first session of meditation. And those of you who have been meditating for a while, this approach will also help you. And it's kind of common to everyone, regardless of whether you've been here for the first time, whether you even tried of Sahaja or not. So let's close our eyes first. And we should be sitting in a relaxed posture. If you are sitting on a chair, then your feet should be touching the ground. If you're sitting on the ground, then great, that's fine too. But either way, let's just relax for a few moments. Keep our eyes closed. Prepare ourselves for meditation. Now, the first thing we do is try to stabilize our attention and turn it inward. Prepare ourselves for achieving this connection of our spiritual self to the higher state of consciousness. So we want to humble down and be in a state of surrender, and we are surrendering to this all pervading power. Now, everything in Sahaj starts from the heart. So we take our right hand, place it on our heart on the left side. This is where our spirit resides. And here we say the affirmation, I am the pure spirit. And from our hearts, in all sincerity, I am the pure spirit. Next, we want to take our attention on the left side lower abdomen. This is the center of pure knowledge and pure desires, and this is also the chakra. When we express our pure desire, the Kundalini energy starts rising. So let's keep our right hand on the left lower abdomen and say, Mother Kundalini, please rise and give me my self realization. Please give me pure knowledge. And now the third step is taking our right hand, placing it on the crown of the head, on the top of the head and towards the back where the crown of the head is. This is the seventh chakra or the Sahasrara chakra. This is the gateway to the all pervading power and for achieving the connection. So let's say the affirmation, please grant me my self realization, or please establish my self realization. And now let's take our hand back, and both our hands should be on our laps now. The energy, Kundalini energy, has been awakened, and we will now try to stay in that higher state of consciousness, keeping our attention on the crown of the head. And those of us who have been meditating for a while, we can now raise our Kundalini energy specifically in the usual technique. Let's continue to keep our attention on the crown of the head. Gradually, the thoughts begin to disappear. If the thoughts are still coming back, let's just watch those thoughts, allow them to pass by. Let's keep both our hands on our laps, fingers stretched out, trying to feel a sort of tingling sensation or the vibrations on our hands. And let's continue to meditate in this state for a while. As we feel our attention stabilizing, let's go deeper, keeping our attention still on the Sahasrara, but trying to surrender completely to this all pervading power, leaving and letting go all our problems, all our thoughts and worries. Just allow the power to help us and to stay in that higher state. Now we can slowly open our eyes and come out of the state of meditation. And we can continue this session. Just before moving to the topic for today, few things on the state. If you want to establish this state, more collective meditation will help, of course, and some sort of a regular schedule of meditation at home, at least twice a day, will help as well. And then in future sessions, we can also briefly look at clearing techniques and so on, things which will help us enhance and achieve this state more often. With that said, let's get to the topic for today, which is using meditation as a method to control, or you could say, to solve some of the problems. So the first thing is that from a spiritual standpoint, when it comes to money and finances, there are a couple of spiritual aspects that govern, you could say, everything relating to our wealth, which is material wealth essentially, and also associated problems with that. And that's important to understand and lay the foundation, because a lot of people who obviously don't get their self-realization, are not into a spiritual way of life. um, Generally, yes, they have different concepts and thinking about wealth and so on. But when we begin to pursue spirituality, then our wealth or financial aspect, you could say, starts getting governed more and more by these spiritual aspects. And what are those spiritual aspects? There are a couple of them that are most important. The one is the spiritual principle or power of wealth, or you could say the innate power within us that gives us our wealth. And in Sanskrit, the term is known as Mahalakshmi, or it's the Mahalakshmi principle. And it's also the Lakshmi principle, rather, you could say, which is the power inside us, inside our spiritual system, that helps us, you could say, achieve our wealth, the necessary level of wealth, balance it and use it in the right way, and also ensure that all our needs and obligations are taken care of, right? So how do you establish this principle? There are, you could say, many principles, such principles, spiritual principles or aspects or powers within us, which are embedded in different parts of our spiritual system. When we achieve the state of meditation and we pursue spirituality, those powers and principles begin to manifest and strengthen themselves. And this particular principle can be developed, can grow stronger through weeks, months, days, you could say years of meditation, and we grow stronger and stronger. In a way, you could say that this power starts governing our financial life, and it ensures that it is brought to balance. And we will shortly see what that balance it means. The second thing about materialism and material wealth, the second part of the subtle system, is the Navi chakra itself, which is the chakra number 3. It is in the stomach region, or at the point where we have our navel. And this chakra specifically addresses the contentment aspect of it. So we all know that the pursuit of wealth and how much we have, how much we spend, a lot of it is related to how contented we are. So somebody could have, say, an X amount of wealth and still not be happy, and somebody else could have much lesser wealth and still be happy. So in that sense, when we look at it, wealth is truly relative. Wealth is a means to achieve our needs, which can be of different types and can be of different degrees for each one of us, right? So the most basic need is we need food, clothing, shelter, and so on. What degree of food, clothing, and shelter, largely it varies greatly amongst individuals. So you could say that it is always important to assess. Wealth is not absolute, right? Material wealth is definitely not absolute. You could say that the level of wealth which keeps you contented, so the two work in tandem together. The extent to which you can be contented will also determine how much of wealth you need and how much you can be happy with. And when we say happiness also, it has sort of a different meaning in Sahaj, and we will come to that shortly. So in essence, what I want to say that is that the Nabi chakra governs the contentment levels within us. And it is not just important to focus or be aware of wealth, but also be aware of how contented we are. And there's a great chance that working on our contentment can actually solve all our problems of wealth, because most of our problems might be perceived, or if we might get the feeling that we don't have enough wealth. But when you work on your contentment, you might actually feel that you have a lot more wealth than you need. And I can give my own example of that. Before meditation, which was more like 25 years ago, and I used to feel always that maybe I don't have enough and so on. And after meditation, at some point in time, I actually had a lot less. But I felt happier and I felt more contented, and I really felt like I had too much wealth or too much of things, you could say, on the material side, and I probably didn't need so much. So that whole effect is extremely important, and that's why the Nabi chakra, along with the spiritual principle of the power of the wealth, both are important to work on and focus on, and they sort of govern this whole money and finances aspect. So that's the most important concept. I'll move on to the second concept, which is the overall state improvement. We just worked on our state through a meditation, and then the improvement of the Nabi chakra, and then establishing and strengthening the principle of wealth within us is the most important, you could say, journey when it comes to managing, maintaining, avoiding problems or solving problems relating to money and materialism and so on and so forth. So that's why I said for a spiritual person, the approach and the attitudes are very different from those people who generally do financial management and so on. Yes, you might do a budget, you might be worried about how much money you have, how much money you earn, how much you spend, and so on. All that is important. That's, I'm not definitely not saying that those are not important. But before that, we need to understand the basic mechanism for a spiritual person, right? So at the root of our existence, which is the spiritual level, we need to understand how this works, and we need to establish that and keep working on that. And then everything else will follow at an outward level. Maybe the budgets and the money that we earn and so on and so forth will automatically start setting themselves right, or at least we will have the right level of discretion to make sure that we are happy regardless, whatever be our actual wealth and so on. So that's sort of the most important trend that we establish. So if we are a spiritual person, if we want fewer or no problems, or we want to achieve a sense of balance, then we need to work on our overall state. That's number one. Then we need to mind our Nabi chakra. We need to check, we need to be aware of how good our Nabi chakra is. If there are problems, we need to work on that. And then we need to be mindful of this whole principle, the Lakshmi principle, as I said, the principle within us that actually keeps the money flowing into us and even out of us. That's also important when we talk about finances. It is not just about acquiring wealth, but it is also what we do with the wealth. So keeping that balance is done by the establishment of this principle. Now, once this is done, the important state to achieve as a spiritual person is that, and the understanding and maturity is that we will definitely get what we need and deserve. We may not get what we want, right? And that's the key thing to understand. A lot of people are driven by, their definition of wealth is driven by how much do I want, right? I don't have so much. Then that's directly related to their want. I can say with confidence that if you have established your spirituality and if you established your Nabi chakra and principle, wealth principle, then you will definitely never face a problem. You will always have whatever you need, and you will always get what you deserve in a positive sense, that you will not find it to be wanting, right? But there are also times when even spiritual people obviously have wants. We are not like 100% saints. We are all, you could say, work in progress. So there might be so many things which we want. But as long as we keep our attention on what is a need versus what is a want, we will find that whatever we need absolutely will not have any issues at all. And that is regardless of our personal changing situations. At times we may be without jobs, at times we may be constrained for money and so on. But we will never find that we will have a serious problem not being able to satisfy some of our basic needs. And that happens when we establish our spirituality and specifically these spiritual principles. The next one is that financial management and money, many people would say the common wisdom out there is, oh, do a budget, try to earn more money, try to save money, and then use the money and so on and so forth, right? It's all about that. I would rather say for spiritual people, all that is important. But before that, you should be surrendered, or we all should be surrendered and balanced first, right? So if our spiritual state is not in balance, right, or if the Nabi chakra is not proper, or we find there are problems with our spiritual system, then that is the first thing to focus on, right? If you have that kind of balance, then the rest of the problems become much simpler and they become easier. We find that we begin to make the right decisions. And that is the true impact of this whole being surrendered and the state, is that our decision making, the way we think, the way we make decisions, all of that falls into place. You might have heard that people make a lot of mistakes or wrong decisions relating to money. And that is because the spiritual balance is not there. And once we specifically work on a spiritual balance, regardless of how much money we have or what we are dealing with, we will find that the innate discretion and the balance comes into play. And that's why being surrendered at all times to this all pervading power and working on the state is important. And so that's really the approach, the first thing before we get on to the specifics. And then the next topic is about, should we strive for money and what's the balance? This is an interesting concept for a spiritual person, because on one end, we can say, oh, we are following spirituality. And if you are truly a saint, so to speak, do you really need money? Can't you not live in a forest, or can't you not live in a cave and still be happy? How do you prove that you are a spiritual person when at the same time you're living in this world and you still want money and so on and so forth, right? How do you define that whole thing? And I think the answer is that the balance is critical. See, in today's world, spirituality doesn't require us to be austere or austerity, for example. It does not test us. The test of our spirituality is not really whether we can, live in a cave versus living the way we do. Rather, the test is at a much higher level. The test is whether we can surrender. The test is whether we can forgive. The test is, whether we are achieving that higher state of consciousness, even living where we are, even driving the cars that we do, and even maybe sitting on couches and all of that, right? So that's sort of the modern day redefinition of spirituality. So we should get rid of this whole notion that we have to be austere or we have to live in a cave and if you're pursuing spirituality, then you should not be thinking about money. I think that that's not a balanced approach. So the recommendation is the balance. Now, the other end of the spectrum is, okay, now it's, sort of, it's okay for us to live in this world and it's okay for us. Then can we go to the extreme of trying to acquire more and more wealth? That is not good too, right? So somewhere in between is where the balance is. And that's where I think we need to, I have something, some chat. Can you just excuse me for a moment? All right. So the balance, real balance over here is that we don't need to be austere and we don't need to chase wealth. We need to be getting to the point where all our needs and commitments are being met, right? And I would also go one step further and say it is okay to strive for money as long as we develop the discretion to spend it the right way. And further down in this presentation, I can share some basic guidance about what is the right way of spending money. So in summary, the answer to this question is, should we strive for money? Yeah, we maybe should is probably not the right word. It is okay to strive for money. It is not okay to live an austere life and use that as a measure of test of our spiritual strength or prowess. We need to find the balance, but we need to not have our attention on chasing money all the time. We need to detach and surrender and still strive for money so that we can take care of our needs, take care of others' needs, and we can also spend the money in a way that we can make an impact on this world, right? That is the true sense of balance that we need to achieve. And it's a sort of balance that we need to work on, our attention needs to work on day in and day out. And it is especially important in the world that we live in because we get tempted. There are powerful advertisements. We may have social pressures. My neighbor has a better car, or my friend has a bigger house, or my colleague is earning more than me, right? Those are all pressures that we face. But at every point in time, we have to remind ourselves that this balance is what is important for us, right? We need to live to our own standards. And as long as we have the spiritual balance, then that's what counts over here. All right. The next point. Let's move ahead. Yes, this was what I was stating. So freeing the attention and staying detached and okay to spend and enjoy within reason. So I'm taking it up one more level. This is about spending and enjoyment. It is not a life of balance if we are trying to once again deny ourselves of certain level of enjoyment, right? And how do we define enjoyment again varies with each person, right? What we consider as somebody considers as enjoyment may not be enjoyment for somebody else. But as long as the enjoyment or the form of enjoyment and the extent of enjoyment is not putting constraints on your attention, it is okay. And it is not sort of taking you in the negative direction, right? Which is not harmful to your spiritual system and so on. As long as you are within reason and you are enjoying using your money, right? And you are able to detach and keep your attention free, that is completely fine. In fact, that is a state that we want to be. So which means that let's take an example. So if you are a person who likes, say, for example, wearing a particular type of attire, which may be a little bit expensive or more than average, and I don't know what the average is, or let's say you want a lifestyle that is slightly more than the average lifestyle, it is okay for you to spend and acquire that lifestyle without feeling guilty that you are pursuing a spiritual life, as long as you can detach from that lifestyle in a moment, right? And you can easily give it up anytime, and it is not a must have for you. If it is getting to that, then you probably need to scale back. So the general thumb rule is that with money and how much we should buy and acquire for ourselves is that as long as your attention is free and it is helping you stay focused on your spirituality and it is not putting pressure on you to maybe solve your problems, or you're not short of money or anything like that, or as long as you're happy and you are still detached from your lifestyle, it is perfectly okay to go ahead and spend and enjoy within reason. So that's the recommendation from the whole Sahaj body of teachings that we have. The other thing is, it is actually good and it is a must for us to use or have enough wealth to take care of our personal obligations. It is not a good idea to say, I'm a spiritual person and be sort of completely without a job, without money, and so on, neglecting our duties. That is not what Sahaj is. So when it comes to money, the minimum thing we need to do is we need to make sure our obligations towards our friends, families, and whatever else we have must be taken care of. So we must at least be trying to earn as much wealth necessary for that. Um, Financial struggles affect spiritual progress. This is also another. If we have too little wealth, or if we get into problems, then we immediately will find that we are not able to focus on our spiritual life, right? So it's always good to be in that medium or that balance state where you have enough money to take care of your personal obligations, and you have maybe even enough to enjoy a little bit so that your attention is not attached and held back, and then use your attention wisely to achieve that spiritual state. So it is good to strive for money and avoid financial struggles, although based on what I said, if you're working on your Nabi chakra, if you're working on your principle of wealth, you will find that financial struggles will inevitably, they will not arise. That's, I think, this state that you will find that you are in. So the converse of what I'm saying is that if you do have financial struggle, then that means spiritually somewhere we need to work, you need to work on yourself. That's number one. And second, a struggle, the meaning of the word struggle, you need to revisit, right? What appears to be a struggle might actually be related to your ambitions or your the level to which you are contented, right? So those are things to look at. The other common principle that has been shared amongst many practitioners and across the teachings from our founder is that if you have wealth, if you use it to give joy to others, such as gifts, which will make people happy, then that is one of the best uses of money. One of the best uses. There are other good uses for it. So it's also related to the concept of generosity, which again goes back to the Nabi Chakra. If we have the money, if we are generous enough to spend it and see the joy in others and make others happy, then that's an excellent use of wealth and money. So that's also one of the top areas where we should focus on, rather than trying to struggle for not enough money or trying to say, oh, I don't need enough money. It's not just about us. The wealth can go beyond our basic obligations to making others happy and for even higher purposes, as we will see. Living within our means is again a powerful concept, not something new. Everybody, even an ordinary financial person or a normal financial advisor, will tell you that this is a good idea. But I think that there is more focus as spiritual people within Sahaj to say that it's important that we live within whatever means that we have, because it will then result, if we do not do that, it will result in problems which will also hamper our spiritual progress. That is the more important thing. Living within our means, everybody knows that you have to live within our means, but there are more severe consequences of not living within our means as far as spirituality is concerned, because then our spiritual growth gets hampered. So this is an important concept. The next best, or I would not say an equally good use or even a better use of money, is money spent on higher purpose and spiritual improvement of the world. Now, this is an important topic by itself. I have come across many Sahaj practitioners, and from our founder, the advice is that let's say you have saved money and you have money to donate and you would like to donate. And I think making donations, trying to solve people's problems will automatically happen once your heart is in the right place and it grows stronger and through spirituality. But the question comes, what is the right use of money, right? And the recommendation is that rather than donate to, say a Red Cross or, some initiative, which by themselves are okay. I'm not saying that's wrong in any way, but a better way to do it is to use your money wisely for changing people's lives and for spending in what you might say is making the world more spiritual and a better place to live in. That has a longer term impact. Of course, it's a slower thing. You will not see your returns immediately. If you spend some money on something, some objective like that, you may not see your returns immediately. But for sure, that is the highest form of quality of donation that you can think of, or you can do with your surplus money. And so looking at it in a different way, if you correlate it with the earlier point, we said striving for money, right? It's not such a bad thing if you are using the money to fulfill your obligations and duties. That's number one, the most basic level. And you're not worried about, you're not obsessed with money and you can easily give it up and give up your comforts and all that. That's number two. Number three, if you're earning money and you are using it to, give joy to others, then that's good too. And last but not the least, if you're spending your excess money and diverting it towards, spiritual causes where something in this world can change, then it is completely okay. In fact, that is the right approach to seeking or earning more money. So that is something that we should be mindful of. So this then kind of gives the balance, right? How much money should I earn? Should I really, and it also relates to careers as well, right? Should I be ambitious? Should I strive for a career that is going to give me more money than my current job? Yes, it's not wrong for a spiritual person to do that. I would say, if it were me, I would rather say, yes, why not? If you can actually do better, get a job which pays more, that is fine. It doesn't mean that you are greedy or you're trying to go after more money. It is more important to see how you manage your money and what you do with your money, right? So I would rather have more money that I would give out for better causes and to improve this world rather than have less money, right? That's the whole point. So that's another important, powerful concept. We have been told at many times the best form of donation that you can make is not something temporary or short term, or let's say there is a hurricane and all that. Yes, if you have so much money and you'd like to donate that as well, that's your discretion. That's a good thing. But a better thing would be to see how to donate money so that spirituality is established in this world. A few more concepts for today. There is a concept known as freely flowing wealth. And it kind of goes back to this whole principle of wealth, or the Lakshmi principle, which says that um, if money stagnates within you, if you try to hoard it and possess it and say get more money and try to lock it up and all that, it probably isn't such a good thing. It's always good to have freely flowing wealth, which is wealth that comes in and then is balanced, and then it is spent for good causes. And that is typically to be a better state. And in fact, it is said that this whole spiritual power and this principle of the Lakshmi is actually is a free flowing thing. If you actually circulate it well enough, then you will actually get more money coming in. But if you lock it down and you say, I want to keep all this money to myself, that of course does not mean the other extreme, that you should have no savings at all and so on. Within reason, within right balance, it's always good not for wealth to stagnate, but for it to be put to use. And so keep an eye on spending money wisely as well for the good causes. It's not just all about earning more money. The other concept often emphasized in Sahaj is that if money is interfering either in our own spiritual ascent, or especially those of our children, when we, for example, want to spoil them with things and luxuries that they don't need, then that's not a good thing at all. So the fact that we have money and we can afford something need not be a reason that we choose a lifestyle that is ultimately going to interfere with our spiritual ascent. That applies for us. It applies for our family members. It applies for our friends, and it applies to our donations as well. So when we make a donation, for example, of the extra money that we have, the underlying principle should be: is this good for this person? Right? Will it make this person a better person, and spiritually will it help? Same thing with children, right? Is it better for children to work hard on their own and realize the value of money and earn all their comforts beyond the basic needs themselves? Or is it better if I gift it to them, right? So those are questions that need to be answered when it comes to using the money for others. So this is the balancing aspect. I said that money is good for giving joy to others. That is good, but it needs to be balanced by this fact that it should not hamper the spiritual ascent of people. Then the other important topic that's been discussed in many of our teachings from our founder is the concept of debt. And I think that the guidance is clear, just as living within our means is a clear guidance. In the Western countries, especially now, of course, in all countries, there has been a huge increase in the amount of debt that we take on as individuals. So we should be mindful of debt, because every form of debt, of course, from a financial perspective, it's simple enough. We know what debt is. It's an obligation to somebody else. But for a spiritual person, it also takes it's a double impact, right? It also takes away our attention. It puts pressure on our attention. If we owe somebody something in any form of debt, right, it is a pressure on us, on our attention, which otherwise can be freed up for spiritual purposes. That is the concept that we need to understand from a spiritual standpoint. So given that money today is related to debt almost inevitably, there are so many things we finance, we borrow money. And this is not to say that debt is bad. That's clearly not what I'm saying. It's just that you have to introspect, each person has to introspect and see, is this amount of debt, or is this debt putting pressure on my attention? And is it causing me more worries and more headaches, so much so that I'm not able to focus spiritually, right? That is the question we need to ask and answer, so that then you can decide for yourself what level of debt, or if debt at all, makes sense for you. The other thing goes about buying, and I mentioned about spending, gifting, and giving joy and all of that. But when we acquire things in general, this is also a very powerful recommendation that is there in so many of teachings, is that when we spend money, a few things to look for. It is a whole lot better if we spend it on natural things. When I say natural things, the best example I can give is to avoid plastics, right? Man-made stuff. Whereas if you buy things of wood, if you buy things which are artistic in nature, handmade and all of that, within reason. Again, if they are going to cost 3 or 4 times the money, then obviously that's not a wise decision. See, in Sahaj, it's all about balance. It's not about just one thing in one dimension. We need to always be looking for the balance. So in general, natural things have, the reason for recommending natural things is that natural things around us give better vibrations. And the flow of the energy, the ambience, our homes become better places, not just for our meditation and for the energy to flow around, but you will find that it creates positive vibrations, attitudes amongst people, and so on, and happiness and all of that. So instead of getting a lot of plastic things, lot of things which are man-made, which tend to hamper our attention, having beautiful natural things which are artistic generally is more value. And also keeping things simple, right? Not too many complications. And the reason for that is, I can give you an example. So if you're buying, for example, an extremely complex appliance, right? Yes, it may do some benefit to you, but in the end, it again, you have to pay through your attention. If it goes bad, or if it has to be repaired or something, then it's a headache. So the more complexity you take on in our lives, then the more of our attention is going to go. The more things we accumulate, the more things we have to manage, and then it takes away that share of attention which otherwise can be spent for spiritual purposes. So that's the reason and recommendation for keeping it relatively simple. The other thing is the long-lasting concept. So if we buy a thing and we don't have to worry for the rest of our lives about it, then that's a great buy. Of course, we may not, if we are feeling that we have to constantly buy something or change and need variety, then that's a different topic altogether. But in general, making a purchase, something that's long lasting, would obviously make sense, not just from a a real world standpoint, a commonsensical standpoint, but more because we don't have to spend our attention on it again. Even if we have to spend a little bit more money and buy more expensive things which are long lasting, we are only going to spend our attention for that point in time when we make the purchase. We don't have to worry about it later. As opposed to that, if you're buying cheaper things and you have to keep on, buying them again and again, then we're spending more attention on it. And attention is premium in Sahaj. That's the whole concept. The other thing is fulfilling things that tend to make us satisfied, which can again vary. It can be from a spiritual satisfaction, it can be from a joy and finer aspect, or it can just satisfy some of our basic needs. So in essence, this point talks about, we have the money, if we want to spend and we want to buy something, the purchasing part of it, what should be the considerations and criteria we should gravitate towards, right? These are the criteria as far as Sahaj recommendations go. Living within our means, we have already discussed. Yes, buying things also we just discussed. Minimalist versus acquiring things. And I do want to point out again the balance versus being a minimalist. If you want to be a minimalist out of choice, that's good, but that's not a necessity. It does not mean that a spiritual person does not have things that are good or does not have more things. As long as we are detached from those things and we don't really need them and we can give them up, it is okay to have things. Simplicity is great. And cleanliness and vibrations. This is again another thing that has come repeatedly, is that when we acquire and buy a lot of things, right? Order on Amazon and just accumulate, and soon we have so much stuff and so much of things to store. It is bad from a hygiene standpoint. Yes, we all know that. But from a spiritual standpoint, the vibrations begin to get affected. Having fewer things and having an open space and clearer things will mean better vibrations. So we don't want our homes to make it more difficult for us to be in that higher state of meditation. We want it to be easier. And one way of doing that is to have fewer things and also natural things, which will enhance the vibrations. And I think we will stop with that for today's session. I do have more specific guidance and recommendations from a Sahaj lifestyle as it relates to money. But we will recap. The most important thing, other than these specific recommendations, is that we need to work on our state. And then the second thing, which is specific to the particular topic, is we need to work on our Nabhi chakra, and we need to work on our principle of wealth getting established. And that is a way to overcome all our challenges with respect to money and finances. So it's time now to do a short meditation before we end this session. a second time. Now we'll focus on the Nabi chakra. So let's close our eyes one more time and try to get into the state of meditation. We will work on our Nabi chakra now, along with some affirmations. So let's bring our attention back first to our Sahasrara. Take a deep breath, surrender to this all pervading power. Let's now take our attention to the Nabi chakra, which is in the center of our stomach. And we're going to address our Kundalini energy as the mother, our spiritual mother, and say a few affirmations. Mother, please make me contented. Please make me generous. Please help me develop concern for the world around me and people around me. And we can use our right hand to clear our Nabi chakra. For those of you who know how the clearing works, it's rotating your right hand clockwise direction around the Nabi chakra. And from the bottom of our hearts, let's ask that we establish the principle of wealth or principle of Lakshmi within us. And now take our attention back to the Sahasrara, crown of the head. Remain in meditation. Now let's slowly open our eyes and slowly raise our energy to conclude the meditation. For those of you who are new, you can take your right hand, slowly move it up from the base of the spine to the top of the head 3 times, hands parallel to the front of your body, arms facing inward. All right, so that brings us to the end of today's session. We will continue the second part of it next week. There are still some more concepts to go over as it relates to money and finances. Hopefully, this has been useful. And if you do have any questions, please you can write to me over our support email ID. You can get in touch with me. I'll be happy to answer. Yes, if you have any questions, you can always um, what specifically to work on the Navi, affirmations and foot soak. Okay, we will discuss this in the next session, specific recommendations and techniques to work on the Navi. All right, then. Thanks a lot for attending, and I'll see you next time.